We have a rather unusual story to tell. It is an important story, one that has truly revolutionized military training in the United States Army. What gives here?
Conti, Lee, Rapida, Erie. But it's time that you, the people of America, knew the truth about the Aggressor Nation.
In the late 1940s and in the early 1950s, the aggressors were formed by the U.S. military as a fictional enemy to participate in war games. This Aggressor Nation was equipped with their own uniforms and language that easily identified them as a foreign threat, making the war games as realistic as possible to prepare our troops for foreign invasion.
In Texas, staff officers plot an attack that will encircle aggressor forces. Tanks go into action in Operation Longhorn, the biggest war games ever held in the United States. 115,000 men are taking part.
That is more than the number of American troops who landed on Normandy beaches on D-Day. On April 3rd, 1952, this broadcast played on KHIT in Lampasas, Texas, a small town about 70 miles north of Austin.
Shortly after 8 o'clock this morning, the aggressor military government took control of the city. In rapid order, city officials were arrested and taken to places of confinement. Lampasas, Texas, the community with a history as colorful as any storybook fable, today added another chapter.
Around noon, many townspeople gathered in the square as the aggressors' forces took control of the town.
And I recall very vividly seeing my dad with the microphone, and there's a picture of him in this stand right here, holding a microphone and speaking out against the aggressor forces. You know, we would defeat them, they would not last, and all of that. And about that time, two aggressors dressed as MPs came and lifted him up. My dad was about 6 feet tall, and carted him off to prison. And I was just reading in one of the newspaper clippings that he was sentenced to death for speaking out against the aggressors. And I didn't realize that. I guess they never told me that. But
Daddy wanted to see all the excitement, and my mother stayed, and the soldiers came to our dairy, and she remembered taking my little brother, who was 2, from window to window to see what the soldiers were doing. And Daddy came in and he hadn't seen a thing.
It was fascinating for me to be 6 years old and there's just that many soldiers.
They came in there and they set up, it was a field artillery unit, and they had guns set up in 2 or 3 places around the edge of that mountain. It seemed like they shot them all during the night, you know. They shot enough that you didn't get much sleep.
One night in the darkest pitch, I won't tell you. They rolled in there with 2, probably D7s on trucks and operators on them, engines running. They said the aggressors blowed out the bridge and they had to build a crossing. They unloaded those tanks up there at that road, which is 200 yards from the river, and drove them down there and made a crossing darkest pitch. They didn't have any kind of light. I mean, you couldn't see your hand in front of you. And that was good training, I suppose.
Lomida's a town, it was a town of about 600 then, maybe 8. Don't quote me on any of that, but when this 120,000 came rolling through Lomita, but it was close to where the airdrop was.
So a lot of people drove up there and parked along the side of the road and wherever else they could park, and all of a sudden the big transport planes began to fly over. And so everybody jumped up and started looking at the planes, and at that time, these paratroopers came jumping out of that plane, and it was so impressive to me that they just filled the sky with parachutes there for quite a few minutes while everybody was floating toward the ground.
The day of the jump, the wind was gusting, but the jump was held nonetheless. Over 200 parachutists were seriously injured, broken backs, broken arms. And one died when his parachute failed to open and he plummeted to his death in front of the onlooking spectators. Among the spectators was his father, who did not know for the better part of the day whether the soldier he had seen plummet to his death was his son or not. It wasn't, fortunately.
8 soldiers lost their lives during the simulation. One was a paratrooper that lost his life in the jump. Others were bitten by snakes, and some were killed by friendly fire. Despite the tragic loss of life, Operation Longhorn was a military success, and war games are still used to prepare our troops for battle.